Hello, this is Fred Abley, and we're going to go over a quick tutorial here on how you can start to use Microsoft Access to import data and then begin working with it. The things we're going to cover firsthand are how to import what's known as a CSV file, also called comma separated values file. Once the data is in there, we're going to create a query in order to retrieve specific data from the table that you just set up with your data import. And last but not least, we'll create a report so that once you have your query built, you can layer a report on top of it in order to display your information and make it more meaningful. The pieces that we're going to assemble here, first and foremost, are going to be the CSV file. The CSV, the comma separated values file, is nothing more than a text file that's produced by another developer or provided to you from a system. And it's a clean file in the sense that it has no overhead to it. It's not formatted for a specific tool. It's a simple text file. In order to get it into Microsoft Access, you're going to make use of its data import feature, which walks you through a series of steps, and it makes it real easy for you to move data from an external file into this personal database system. The first thing we're going to do is make sure we have Microsoft Access up and running. And once you open it up for the first time, you're going to just create a blank desktop database, and that'll get us started. Once you have the database created, you're going to come in here and you're going to see that you have actually nothing in there. Of course, it's a blank database. The first thing you want to do is click on the tab up in the ribbon area for your external data. Since we're working with a CSV file, we're going to say open up a text file. Opening up or looking for the text file is going to allow us then to bring it in. You can browse for it, and I have it here on my downloads. And here's my CSV file. And this is actually a CSV file that was downloaded from the FAA's website that talks a lot about certain statistics and data collected on airlines flights within the United States. So you click on open it, and we're going to just go ahead and import the source data into a new table, and then continue on with it if it prompts you. Now the first thing you do get prompted here is this is a delimited file, so characters are separated with a comma, and when we click next, it's going to start to break them apart into what looks like columnar data, and we could scroll back and forth. And the other thing we want to note here is each one of these columns contains a header, so we check this box here. This is an important first box to check. Everything is separated with a comma, but if you ever do get data that's delimited with another type of character, you could select it here, and they even have a box here where you could specify a special character other than a space, semicolon, tab, and so on. We're going to move along here to click next. When you're at this particular stage, you really don't have to do anything for this exercise, but this is a great area if you have to control the data type that you're putting into your database table here. You could check the columns are all selectable. And if you don't want to import certain fields, if there's something extra in there that you don't need at this time, you could simply select that field and then say do not import. And you could apply that to all those columns. Since we're going to bring in everything, we're just going to click next. And then last but not least, this step here, if you're new to databases, this one concept might be a little new to you, but it's asking you if you want to apply what's known as the primary key. For the purpose of this exercise, the primary key is going to be something that Access is going to assign, and the primary key is a unique value that increments. So in essence, we have all these records in our data set. Microsoft Access adds a new column called ID. This is also known as a surrogate primary key. So it's basically slapping it onto the table, and then it allows us to generate, or Access generates this value for us. So we're going to let Access do that. It's going to assign a primary key because we don't have a primary key in the table data. And we click Next. Last thing you want to do is give it a table name, and we could say FAA data, and we'll let that be the table name and click Finish. Once the data is pulled in, it's going to ask you if you want to save these steps. If this is a type of task you repeat over and over again, you could go ahead and save them. There's no need to do it for this, so click Close. We then come back into Access, and we could see the original table, the blank table that Access opened up with, but we also see now a table called FAA data, and if I were to double click this, I could see my data is now successfully imported here. So this is really a simple process. Now, when you first look at this, a lot of people say, well, it looks like a lot like Microsoft Excel. It does look like Microsoft Excel. One of the big differences between a data set like this being presented in Microsoft Excel and a data set, say, in Microsoft Access is the fact that in Microsoft Excel, we really can't control the data types that are assigned to each one of these fields. So we have all these fields, year, month, carrier, carrier name, and so on. When we deal with databases, it becomes real important. In order to maintain the integrity of the data, we specify the type of data that can go in there. So for example, this would all be character type data, this might be numerical data, and so on. So that's one of the big differences there. So your data is in there. The next thing you can do now is begin to query your data. So we get to this point now where once we have our data loaded up into our database, we can begin to query it. And a query is nothing more than a question. And at the root of it all is SQL, Structured Query Language, SQL. Take your pick on what you want to call it. But Microsoft Access makes it very simple for us to query the data that we have. It utilizes a GUI tool or a GUI front end, graphical user interface, and it makes it easy to quickly scale up and build a query to get to our data. Here we are now back into Microsoft Access, and we have our data loaded, and we have 1,147 records, which is right down here. And now we're going to begin to query it. To do that, we're going to go into the Create tab, and we have a series of options in here. You can create tables, queries, forms, reports, and some coding features. The first thing we're going to really focus on right now, though, is the query. You could use either the wizard, which allows you to rapidly do this, or you can go right to the design view, and that's what I'm going to utilize here. When we click on that, we can add in the table that we're going to query. I click Add. Once I've added that, I can close this window down. And here's my table that I'm going to be querying. Down here is the query grid where I'm going to add the fields to retrieve my data from. If I expand my table here, I can see that here's all the fields that we brought in. And there's one in here that has a little golden key next to it. This signifies the primary key. And we discussed that earlier on when we were importing our data. So right now we're going to create a query that's going to display the airport's name, or the airport we'll go with. If I double click it, it immediately adds it there. Or if I go down and click the column next to the field I just added to, there's a drop down with the fields there and I can select it. And I'm going to go focus here on security delays. And it's coming from the table called FAA data. And I could run that query. Up in the upper left hand corner there's the icon and I click run. It then displays the airports with their 3-digit codes, and it also displays the counts that were under the security delay column. All right, so that's pretty easy. Now, if I want to go back in and edit this query, and I can see that it generated it as a new tab, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click on Design View, and it takes me right back to where I was. If, for example, I wanted to query on a specific airport, say Orlando, which I know is MCO, and I know that only because I've traveled there in the past, and I could come in here, I could specify that in what's known as my criteria. So criteria helps us to filter the data, and this is just one approach to doing that. And I'm going to go ahead and type MCO, and now I'm going to run my query, and then I get MCO several times, and I get various security delays. Now, some people look at this and they'll say, well, why is it repeating over and over again? Well, that's an easy question to answer. I'm going to go back into my design view, and I'm also going to add the carrier's name to my query, and I'm going to run that. And I quickly find out that we have the airport as we already specified and the security delays as we already specified, and now we start to see that there's all different carriers on there, and it turns out to be JetBlue Airways is showing 88, and Southwest Airlines is showing 153. Now, I don't know what the reasons are behind these delays. I'm sure we can take a look at it and dig in a little bit further. But that's really the real easy way to creating a query. Now, once you've created your query, you're going to want to go ahead and save it, and you can give it a name. And we're going to call this FAA security delays. And because we filtered on MCO, I'll put MCO. And this way, if it's labeled clearly, it shows up over on my Object Explorer, and it's here, and it's real easy for us to call upon later on if we need it. I could go ahead and actually close down those other tabs. They're really not needed to be opened. Okay, so now we get to the point in this exercise where we can take the data that we've imported and then we queried, and now we can actually display it. Now, report writing is almost like an art, but it's an important part to the whole process of working with data and databases, because you want to ultimately be able to look at the data in the right context and then make a decision. So it ultimately helps. The report is the vehicle that helps I guess, transfer data into information, depending upon what that is. Some examples of reports that we all see would be like bills or grade reports or anything like that that we get in order to see certain levels of data. So let's take a look at this. Okay, now, so here we're at the point where we're going to build a report. Since we've already built our query, that's going to make this process really, really easy for us. So we're going to go back again once again to the Create tab, and we're going to notice that we have a section in here. We could actually create a report from scratch or go right to the design or somewhere like that. But for now, for our purpose, because we're going to do this pretty quickly, we're going to use the report wizard. And the report wizard is going to allow us to rapidly build this out. The first thing it's going to specify is what are you actually going to build your report on? And since we have a query here, we're going to use that. But also notice we can actually build a report just on the table data itself. So we select our query that we built and saved, and then we know that in that query we displayed 3 columns. Those 3 columns utilized in our query were airport, security delay, and carrier name. So we could add the fields that we want or remove them. It depends upon what you want to display. But let's go ahead and display the airport, the carrier name, and then the security delay. We have those 3 fields. We click Next. And then we can actually group our data. This data right here is pretty finite, meaning we filtered it on a specific value. So there's really no need to even get into a grouping aspect because the data is going to be pretty easy to follow, and we're not going to get into the summarization quite yet. So I'm going to click Next. And do I want to do any sorting? I could specify it by, I could do it in the security delays. We can do it in ascending order or descending order, or the airport names if we had different airport names. But since we only have MCO, we could just leave that blank for now. Then it asks how the layout is, be formatted. And we have columnar type approach. We have a justified approach and a tabular. I think what we could do is we can go with the tabular approach, which is fine here. And then if you want to be portrait or landscape, depending upon how much data you're looking to display, this particular option could become real important. Of course, landscape being wider, if you have more columns of data to show and you're going to go with the tabular form, you want to go with a wider landscape. Or portrait if you have less data. So we'll keep portrait for now. Click Next. And then it wants to know what do you want the title of the report to be. So we're going to keep it as FAA, Security Delays, MCO. That makes sense. And then we could preview the report, or we can actually go into modifying the report's design. But we're going to click Preview the Report for now. Click Finish. And what it's doing is it's going out and it generated it for us. So here we have our data from our query. And it's now in a nice, easy to read result or format. One of the things, though, you can do if you don't like the way it's laid out, Microsoft Access gives you a number of ways that you can go about editing this. So here is essentially just the preview of the report, and that's nice to see here. But I could also go in here to the report itself, and if I double-click it, I'm going to close that preview there. If I double-click this, I can come in and start to double-click and edit certain items, certain fields. If I want to actually change the headers, I could try to do that here, and it won't let me in. What I can do, though, is go to the icon in the upper left-hand corner, select the design view or the layout view. If I go to the layout view, I do have access to changing these. So if I wanted to add this, I could say Orlando, Florida. Now that's part of my report, and if I want to view it, I can see what it looks like in the final version. So with this particular tutorial, what we've seen is we've imported data using a CSV file. We created a query on the table that we then create it from the import, and then we use the the report wizard to quickly create a report on top of our query. So all in all, pretty straightforward process. Okay, so it looks like we're all wrapping up this particular exercise, and everything went pretty well. One of the things we want to definitely go back into is the formatting aspect. So I'm going to come into the report and change my view, and I'm going to go into the layout view, but this time I think I'm going to go to the design view. When you go to the design view, you can see that you have this grid-like layout and there's no data. Well, this is because this is the frame, or the layout portion that allows you to edit the report. If you come in here, once again, we can double click these areas. One of the things that we want to watch out for is as we start to retrieve data from our database table, it's going to pull sometimes a cryptic column header with it. For the purpose of creating a well-formatted report, we want to make sure that we clean up everything. Now, when you read these particular cryptic names, such as carrier underscore name or security underscore delay, yeah, you could read it, but when you do look at reports, you rarely see underscores, and you do want to make sure you capitalize or use proper grammar when you're creating headers and so on. So one of the things we can do is we can come in here, and I can actually capitalize the letter A, and I could also do the same thing, carrier name, and then I could try to run that report and then go back to seeing what it would look like here. Oh, sorry about that. Come back in here. Go to my report view, and I could see it reflected. Another way back in there, as I said before, if you go to the layout view and you double click those fields, you could also clean it up that way. One of the biggest challenges we face sometimes is when there are multiple columns. How do you begin to handle all that? And if you go back into the design name or the design view, you'll see that here is the headers to the columns, and they can be adjusted. Their width can be adjusted. And you also, now in this next row, it says the detail. This is actually the area that controls the formatting for the actual data itself. This being the column header, this being the actual data. So if you have data that's shorter and you need to buy some real estate here, we can actually move certain things around. Sorry about that. I'm going to grab this here and pull it down a little bit so I can see better, and make that shorter. This allows me to focus on making use. Now I've created some space here, so if I had additional fields I needed to add, I can now move it in, and I won't have things overrunning each other or getting cut off and so on. So I could come back in, clicking the wrong button there, come back to my home page here, go back to my view, and notice that that's exactly what happened. In the case here, the carrier name, the names are longer than the field that I specified. So you don't want to do that. You want to avoid that. So if you go back in, go to your design view, I'm going to change this field width here again and stretch it back out. And there they're back. All right, so that's one thing you want to watch out for. But going back over here to the airport column, they are kind of short. I can go in and redesign those and maybe shorten those a bit. And now I could view the report. Now there's no real effect there, but I know that if I had to move this column over to the left, the carrier name over to the left a little bit more, that would work out fine. And that's formatting at a high level, and I hope this is helpful to you.